All right, this week on the One More Strongcast with Zola, we're joined by a nutrition guru, Miss Rebecca Lorch.
Hello, happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. To be honest, I'm really excited to talk to you because I don't know shit about nutrition. So you've been dropping a lot of really good knowledge, and a lot of people I know have worked with you. So we have so much we can get into. But why don't we start with a little bit of your background? Like you're a lightweight pro, right? For Strongman Corp?
So I've been competing in strength sports probably for, I don't know, almost a decade now. So I started in powerlifting, did that for about 3 years, moved on from that, found Strongman, got into Strongman. For the first few years, I was competing mostly as a 148 or 165. And I took like third at USS Nationals as 148. And then did some kind of more local stuff. And then I ended up winning my pro card in 2020 in 2019 in Strongman Corporation Nationals as a lightweight, as a 140. That was the first time I'd ever cut down to 140. And then from there, I won America's Strongest Woman the following year as a lightweight, which qualified me for the Arnold Pro, which was really cool. Unfortunately, after that, it was 2021. And as we all know, that was the great shutdown.
Yeah.
So the Arnold didn't happen in 2021. So I turned my sights totally on OSG that year. I just wanted to focus on World's Strongest Woman, 64 kilo. Unfortunately, I tore my bicep right at the beginning of that prep. So I ended up having to have surgery, drop out, came back at the beginning of this year, 2022, and ended up doing the Arnold Pro, which was such an insane experience. So awesome. I actually got up to almost 190 pounds for the Arnold Pro. I think I was like 188. I was thick.
Yeah, because that's funny. That's one of the first times I've really noticed you, because I love watching the women, and I've had a bunch of the girls on that were at that show.
Yeah.
And like that's one of my favorite things to watch. So, but it's weird, and I didn't know you were lightweight before that, because it's happened before. The one year we watched before, it's so weird how they do that, where they invite the lightweight pros and middleweights, but it's an open show, and it's like,
it doesn't really make a lot of sense. There's actually some big news about that I will tell you. But I'll finish my story first.
Yep.
So after that, I was also one of the inaugural female Clash invites. So the very first women's Clash show ever that was planned was the Women's 82 show at Clash on the Coast this year. And I was invited to that show. I had been planning on moving up a weight class anyways after the 64 Worlds. When I tore my bicep, I just decided, fuck it, I'm going to move up anyways. And so that's how I had gotten that invite, because Anthony Furman wanted to invite some women from different classes. So actually, Leah Birdsall got an invite, Rhiannon Lovelace got an invite. Unfortunately, they weren't able to compete in the show, but he did invite some women from different weight classes, because he wanted the best of the best there. And he wanted some women to be able to like kind of come into the middle and show what they could do. So I competed at Clash on the Coast, Clash the 82s, which was a blast also. That was a really big opportunity this year. And now I have been off season since. I'm about to have surgery literally in 2 days.
Yeah.
So I'll be again out of Worlds for surgery for 2 years in a row. But the cool thing about the women's Arnold, I'll tell you before I forget. So we got a word from Dion herself that Rogue is officially taking over the women's Arnold Pro, which means it is going to be an invitational and not a qualifier show anymore. So it is no longer gonna have weight class qualification system like they have in the past. Which means we will probably not see lightweight women getting invited to it anymore, which I actually don't have a problem with. I know that I will say that I know and understand that people have a ton of differing opinions on this. And it was funny because even when I was getting ready for it, I had kind of posted a question box on my story that was like, what do you guys think about lightweight women qualifying for the Arnold Pro. Because in my opinion, I think it's very cool. I think it's a huge, it felt like a huge opportunity for me. Obviously, I was the last lightweight woman who will ever get invited, which is cool. But the other thing I think is like, I know that people think it's really awesome to see the small girl out there picking up the big weight, even if she comes in last place. I think that the bigger thing for me is that if we want to have a show that we're considering to be one of the most elite shows in the world, then you need to make sure that all 10 people there are competitive in an elite manner. And at the end of the day, if you invite a 140-pound woman to an open show, there's just no way that she's going to be, you know, even Rhiannon Lovelace or Shannon Clifford, who are massively strong women, just nothing could compare to them, right? Like if you put them next to Victoria Long, they, you know, like the competition is just not there, right? And so I think that if we're gonna have a show that we're calling this like very, 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 very elite open show, one of the heaviest women's shows in the world, then we need to invite 10 women who are going to be really competitive at that level, in my opinion. And I'm sure people will disagree with me, and that's fair. I can totally see other people's sides on this too. I think that on the other hand, it is a bit of kind of like, it's an expo, and it's a way for people to see these like small women like Chloe Brennan lift the Denny stones, right? Which is this amazing, awesome feat. But like, it's cool to see that in the Rogue event. Right?
I actually missed that. I went to go talk to one of my sponsors at their booth and come back, and everybody's cheering. I'm like, what did I miss?
I know, I missed it too. I was so upset. It was one of the few things I missed that I really wish I could have seen. But and I love Chloe Brennan. You know, her and I have known each other for a couple of years now. She's great. We talk online, you know, relatively often. But I just think, you know, if we're calling this like one of the most elite competitions in the world, it needs to be 10 people who are competitive with each other. And the other thing is that at a certain point, you know, when you're asking a 140-pound competitor to put 800 pounds on their back, are we not now just putting people in danger?
Yeah.
Like, I get that it's a sport, and it's, at the highest levels, all sports are dangerous, right? But like, are we not just, you know, they're going to try it. I wasn't not going to try it. Actually, I did hurt my back trying to pick up that yoke. So like, it's like, you knew I was going to try to pick it up. I'm not going to not try to pick it up once I'm out there and there's a crowd screaming at me. So it's like, I think we're like we're mitigating risk by not inviting people who are simply not big enough and not strong enough to necessarily be competitive there. But I think also, if we're going to call it this like elite show in the same way that the Arnold men's show is really elite, then all the women there need to be able to really compete with each other, and not have like 5 women who compete with each other and then a few women who maybe just aren't really very competitive there. Actually 8 women maybe who are competitive and 2 women who are maybe not competitive, which I think is more of the realistic case.
I definitely I totally agree with you on it. It's awesome to see like the chance, because I remember the first time I witnessed that, it was like I said, I don't know what year it was now, maybe the Arnold in 2019. I remember Jessica Thieker and Farah Francesca or something, right?
Yeah, Farah Fonseca.
Fonseca. So they both competed, and I'm watching them being like, okay, you're seeing like the open girls, and I'm like, they're tiny. Like Farah was tiny. Like Jessica could bulk up a little bit because she went to middleweight now. But
she can get a little bigger. She's kind of like, you know, about my size.
I
think like in the 160s.
And I didn't realize, because I've never really done much strongman where I was in USS and then like in the OSG. So I didn't realize until I found out, I'm like, that makes no sense that you're inviting the lightweight women, the middleweight women, the heavyweight women, and you're making them do the same show. And there's, like you said, there's no way that you could ask a tiny girl to move the same weight that you're asking, like you said, Victoria Long, or back then it was Brooke Sousa, or you know, it's just crazy.
Historically, when we look at it, a lot of the lightweight women competing have gotten injured at that show. You know, Christina Bang, for instance, got injured. She hurt her knee pretty badly. Like, so I hurt my back pretty bad. I was really struggling on day 2. I don't even know how I got through day 2, to be honest. So like, you know, I just think there are so many opportunities for weight class women right now, and more keep coming. And that's so cool. I love seeing more opportunities for the weight class women. But like, the Arnold Pro might just not be one of them.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm okay. I don't speak for everyone in Strong Woman, obviously, but I personally am okay with that. I think I'm so lucky to have had that opportunity. I think it was like so fun. It was something I'll never forget. It was really significant for me in my personal life for a lot of reasons. Like, I'm never going to forget that weekend. I'm never going to forget the experience. But like, yeah, it hurt me. Training for it fucked me up really bad. And I'm glad that it's over. And, you know, I'm actually really excited to see how Rogue takes it on and moves it forward, to be honest.
Yeah, I've heard somebody else has told me that before, the same thing, that they're taking it over. It was really cool to watch you though, because everything you did was like a PR. So like you got like one on the Viking press and you were like ecstatic and you're like, okay, you just watched somebody else bang out 10. And I think people realize, once people caught on, they realized like how impressive it was, because you're not, even though you bulked up a little for the show, you're still not genuinely that big of a person.
That was a 25-pound PR.
Yeah. So like it's cool to get behind it. But like you said too, could you imagine if the men's show, they invited the 50-year-old over guy from the Nationals to compete on the main stage?
Right. Well, I mean, that would be like if they invited Tommy Lavelle to the Arnold Pro.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, he's a phenomenal athlete, right? Like, there's no doubting that. He was world's strongest man under 80 second year. He's one of the best 80-kilo men in the world.
Yeah.
But like, nobody would, if he was invited to the Arnold Pro, it would be crazy. And he would probably get very injured if he tried to do it.
I guess the funny thing, and I've had a shitload of Clash athletes on here, and I've had Furman on twice. Like what he's doing in all these weight class shows for everybody, it's awesome. Because I think it's before, when you started, like you couldn't have it many. So when you wanted to have a women's pro show, there weren't enough maybe top tier heavyweight women to like fill a show. So okay, we're gonna have kind of a qualifying thing. Well, now I think if we sat her now, we could put together a class of 10, open women, some still being middleweight, like obviously like Peacock and Sam Bellevue, that aren't heavyweights, but they could hold their own.
I mean, but even if you think about it, like I think I believe Corey Butler walks around at like just over between 210 and 220. I mean, Sam Bellevue walks around like just between 190 and 200, around 190, 190, 200, I think. So like, they're not small girls. And I think that when we're looking at women who are heavyweight women who are athletes, like, none of the really good heavyweight women are really over 250, 260. We're not seeing like a lot of 300-pound heavyweight women that are at the top of the sport.
Yes, it seems like it shifted, because a few years ago there were, like, if the open women a few years ago were a lot of the bigger girls, probably the 250 to 300 range, maybe.
Yeah.
And you've seen like them kind of dwindle down, because the sport's getting more athletic. So you take.
Well, I think it is, right. The sport is getting a lot more athletic.
It's even on the men's side. Like before, if you go back and watch World's Strongest Man from the, probably from the 80s, 90s, you've seen a lot of 400-pound guys that couldn't move. Well, the sport
you see a lot more guys. You see a lot more heavyweight men with abs these days. That's for sure. So it might be a turtle belly with abs, but they got them.
Yeah, so the sport's definitely shifted on the men and women's side, where it's got to be more athletic. So yeah, the big guys still do well, but like you said, you don't see the big sloppy overweight guys like we used to see 10, 15, 20 years ago. All the guys are pretty lean. I mean, like you said, they have abs, they have the vascularity, and the women the same way. Like you're not seeing the 300-pound woman anymore dominate, because she can't do the moving events as well as some of the other girls.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think at a certain point there is a level of at a certain level of body fat, it is not doing anything to improve your athletic performance, right? And so I think that most athletes at a certain point, if they have an excessive amount of body fat, and I'm not talking about people who are just, a little thicker or don't have abs or maybe like above on the obesity charts or whatever. I'm talking about people who have excessive body fat. Anyone who gets into sports at a certain point, they're probably going to address that, just because it is going to make it easier for them to be better athletes. It's going to make it easier for them to recover. their, general inflammatory response is going to be reduced by a lot. Their cardiovascular conditioning is going to be much easier to get better. So when we're looking at all of your general health markers and your abilities to improve as an athlete, especially as they pertain to recovery, sleep, things like that, the less body fat you have within reason, obviously there's a point where being too lean is obviously not helpful either, but having less body fat is helpful at a certain extent. And that's like, it's a scientific fact. It doesn't have anything to do with body type or how I feel about anyone's body. It's like, that's just what it is, right?
Yeah.
When we're looking at a person's physical body's ability to recover and be better at being an athlete, it does help to have less body fat. And I think people are being more cognizant of that nowadays, and they're trying to improve that because they want to be better athletes, especially people at the top, right? Even if we look at powerlifting, we're not seeing these guys in powerlifting anymore, men or women, who are have excessive body fat. We're just not seeing it. It's not, there's the age of the really kind of really super obese strength athlete is just not, we've just gone past it because we've realized it's not a thing that makes any sense.
Yeah. Do you think that come with like the better nutrition and the better prehab and rehab, and like I said, just to being healthy? Do you think that was kind of what kind of geared it that way? Or do you think like, it's almost like the chicken or the egg, like what came first? Do you think that they realized?
I think it's hard to say, right? I mean, I think the rise of kind of weight class strength sports certainly probably had something to do with it, right? As we saw like these kind of weight class athletes get bigger, get better and stronger, people were kind of like, maybe I don't have to eat 6,000 calories a day to get strong.
Yeah.
Interesting. Because you also had, on the flip side of it, you also had people that were practically force feeding themselves to stay that big, right? To intentionally stay enormous, right? Because it was going to make them stronger. They were just in these massive calorie surpluses all the time.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so I think it was a combination of a lot of things. And, I think it's kind of like once a few people start doing it, once a couple of, it only takes a couple of guys to do it for a bunch of other guys with a lot of ego to be like, I could do that too.
Yeah.
You're laughing because it's true.
Yeah. I mean, not me. I mean, I don't have abs. I'll never have abs. I'm sitting at about 350. And
I'm just talking about the ego joke, but I think probably in the very big men crowd.
Yeah. Well, you look at
certainly.
It was funny. Like, I mean, even like when Eddie Hall dropped the weight, he got huge. If you watch like his documentary, he was just trying to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and it damn near killed him once he did what he had to do.
Yeah, I mean, he even said he was like, dude, I'm viciously unhealthy. Like,
yeah. And I think a lot of the guys, once they start looking at their health markers, they're like, yeah, like we're not healthy. And like you said, there's a point where that size, I mean, sometimes they say mass moves mass. If you're doing a truck pull or something, yeah, the bigger guys are going to be able to lean and get it going better. But for the most part, it's a hindrance. Having that extra weight, having an extra 20, 30, 40 pounds doesn't benefit you.
There's definitely a point of diminishing returns, right? Yeah. There's being stronger and being in a calorie surplus for recovery. And then there's just having excess body fat on you, and that fat tissue is going to create extra inflammatory response, extra stress on your body. Extra weight on your body is extra stress on your heart, so yeah, it is more stress on your body in several different ways that is going to make it harder for your body to help you be a better athlete.
Yeah.
So I think that's really what we're looking at. Like, and I think that most athletes who exist like as middle and heavyweights have kind of found where a good set point is for them. You'll notice, most heavyweights and middleweights are not walking around with diced up abs, right? Like I know like several heavyweight guys that aren't, right? But they found a nice place with their body weight where they feel strong. They don't feel too heavy, and they feel like they can still sleep, especially for the big guys. It's so important. I mean, I know like, Josh Hatfield, obviously he and I are close, and it doesn't take much for him to reach a weight where he goes from being like having like a little bit of sleep apnea to having like a lot of sleep apnea, right? So, and that's very common for the heavyweight guys, right? Like they'll be like, oh, well, when I'm 340, I sleep pretty good, but as soon as I hit 350, I might die in the middle of the night. So I think when you get really big guys, you have a lot of those issues too that you have to address, and you have to be really cognizant of like, all right, what is the best weight where we can keep you big and strong, but you're healthy, you don't feel like you're going to die if you walk a block or 2 blocks or up a flight of stairs, and you're also not having real big issues with things like sleep apnea and blood pressure and, you know, general health markers, right? Like, so we want to look at that stuff, because that stuff, if you're not sleeping all night, or if you're getting shitty sleep all night, well, we could fix that by you losing 10 or 15 pounds.
Yeah. So I know you work you work with a lot of people on weight cuts, and that seems to be like where I keep hearing your name popping up lately.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
But obviously, if we're talking about the open, the heavyweights, we're not cutting weight.
Definitely not talking about cutting weight for open heavyweight.
So do you do like, is it something like a meal prep or nutrition plan for like heavyweights too? I know you work mostly with women.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't actually work mostly with women. I work really with men and women pretty evenly.
Okay.
I'm pretty split as far as clients go, and I work with people across everything. I mean, I have worked with everything from lightweight women and lightweight men up through heavyweight men. So it really, as far as like general consistent nutrition coaching goes, anybody. I prefer to work with athletes, obviously, but I also work with general population. I have a master's degree in nutrition counseling. So, so I'm not like just some, I'm not some coach on the internet, or not some person who just like was an athlete and then was like, I do nutrition.
But that's why I wanted to ask you too about that. So what came first? Did your strength sports lead you to go to school for that? Or did you go to school for that and then get into strength sport, or did they kind of like go hand in hand?
Yeah, I went to school for acting.
Okay.
And then I kind of knew I didn't want to do that by the time I was a senior, but I just finished school anyways to get my degree. And then, you know, it was a weird series of events. I had already started working out. I think I wasn't sure if I was like, I don't remember if I was doing bodybuilding stuff or had gotten into powerlifting yet. But I decided I wanted to go back to school, and I wanted to go for some sort of human science for maybe either physical therapy or nutrition. So I started going to the community college near where I was living and just taking all of the science prerequisites, because I knew that I wasn't going to be able to go into a master's of science program without them.
Yeah.
So I started taking like A&P 1 and 2 and chemistry and physio and bio and all that stuff. And then by the end of that, I decided I wanted to get my master's in nutrition. I think I was powerlifting when I made that decision. I wasn't quite, or I just started Strongman. I was somewhere in the midst of strength sports. Okay. But when I went for my master's degree, I actually didn't want to work with athletes. I always said I hated working with athletes. I wasn't interested in doing it at all. I actually wanted to work in dietetics. When I first went to school, I wanted to do a combined dietetics coursework, which is all undergrad coursework. So I wanted to get my dietetics certificate and my master's degree together. And I decided to drop the dietetics certificate when I was close to finishing my master's, for a few reasons, but it was just gonna be a lot. And I was working full time, and they didn't offer any of the dietetics courses at times that someone with a job could take them. And you would think if they offered it as a graduate certificate that they would offer the classes at graduate times.
Yeah.
But they didn't. So I dropped it because it was going to be way more of a headache than it was worth. And I was like, well, I'll just get my graduate degree and I'll work in nutrition counseling. Which you can do as long as you're not working in medical. You can do that. You can work in nutrition as long as it's not medical if you're not a dietitian.
Okay.
So I don't even remember when I started. After I won America's Strongest Woman, I think someone had reached out to me for nutrition coaching, and that's when I was like, I guess.
Well, I've seen some of your stuff. You're pretty harsh on coaches that don't have any background like you have, and they claim to be nutrition coaches. Because there's so many people in this sport now. It cracked me up because I coach.
Yeah.
I tell my clients I don't know nothing about nutrition. I can help you. I worked with a few guys, but it's so funny. So many people. I wouldn't even say win a show. So many people go and do their first show or their first nationals, and all you see, you start seeing, hey, DM me for coaching. And I know you're
Horror
pretty harsh,
story.
pretty
Yeah.
hard on people that like just blatantly like you need to fire your coach. Your coach is telling you to do something.
So I have a lot of thoughts on this, obviously.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think someone needs to go to college to be a good coach. I think that's ridiculous. What I do think, especially in the nutrition field, is that, and especially when we're looking at the age of internet fitness,
Yeah.
you see a lot of people who get really caught up in they think that like the nutrition science is the most important part. And they really like kind of harp on the nutrition science. And what I mean by that is like nutrient timing and macronutrient ratios. Like the food is like the most important thing to the food and the supplements and the timing and the everything. And the problem with that is that what I would probably say is that even with athletes, the majority of nutrition coaching is actually counseling.
Okay.
And if you have had if you've never learned dick about how to counsel people, you are going to be very bad at nutrition coaching, most likely. Because like, to be honest, most of that doesn't fucking matter for most people. It's not going to make a fucking difference. For most people, if you give them a macro range and they hit it 90% of the time, they're going to make massive progress. As long as they do that consistently, they will probably make massive amount of progress. And they'll be really happy and they'll feel a lot of self-efficacy doing it, which means they're going to continue doing it, right? And that's the thing in nutrition, is that the most important thing in nutrition is that, and this is really in any kind of coaching, whether it's nutrition or business or life or whatever, because it's counseling, is that a person feels self-efficacy in the skills that you're giving them and teaching them. And so the problem is that a lot of these nutrition coaches, they get so caught up in giving people so many details that the first thing that people do is they either fuck it up, and then the coach tells them that they're fucking it up, and now they definitely do not feel any self-efficacy in the plan, or they just don't do it at all, or they fuck it up and they don't tell the coach.
Yeah.
And so they don't make any progress, but they're too scared to tell the coach because they're not doing all the things, because all the things are too many things. And so I think that's really problematic, because it also creates a lot of kind of bad mental problems around food. And I would like to shy away from saying eating disorders, because there's a big difference between eating disorders and having sort of unhealthy perspectives around food. And a lot of that is just from how you've been taught to look at food. And so I think that even as athletes, sometimes even a lot of these coaches are like, they're an athlete, so they're, I'm going to treat them this way. And it's like, unless they're in the top 3%, you treat them like a general population person, because they are.
Yeah.
Especially in a sport like this, it's, these are not NFL players, like, which by the way are also in the top 3%. Anybody else is essentially, they have a normal job, they probably have a family, they have a regular life. They need to be treated like as such. And so the majority of your job should be giving them simple plans that they feel a lot of self-efficacy in and they can be very successful in, because if a person has a lot of success, they're going to continue doing it over a long period of time, and they will probably make a fuck ton of success of progress. And that's really what it's about, right? I think like so many coaches are like, well, you didn't eat the right kind of turkey, and they make a person feel bad about that.
Yeah.
Or they, well, we'll give them these really complicated meal plans or really specific meal plans. And then people don't know how to change things or how to, it's just too much for most people off the bat.
Yeah.
And they can't be successful.
I mean, it comes down to the whole less is more, less is more. Because I've worked with a few different nutrition coaches, and I've had different varying degrees of success. And some are like, here's your macros, kind of do this. I'll kind of like give you an idea. And then I've had other guys write down, what I'm supposed to eat. And with my job and my schedule, like that's the hardest thing I have, because I work a crazy schedule with crazy sleep hours. And so it's really hard to stick to a certain diet plan. Or like, so, I mean, I meal prep, and I do what I can. I try to keep my macros. That was the easiest thing for me, is just like a broad thing. Here's, as long as you stay in your macros, as long as you're hitting within these numbers 90% of the time, 90% of the day, you'll make the gains. And it's easier that way, because you said you're going to see results. You might not see the huge results if you were following a perfect diet 100% to a T, doing exactly what they said. I mean, that's probably the most efficient, but who can do that?
Well, the other thing is that nutrition is not exact. And I think that like macros aren't exact, like your chicken breast one day could have like twice as much water in it as your chicken breast the day before, which means that if it has a higher water content, all the macros in it are going to be less than the chicken was the day before, right? Just because the chicken the day before had less water in it. Like, and also like, as far as labels are concerned, the FDA allows a 20% margin of error on labels. So no labels are correct. You can't trust the label, but the idea is that you can trust it to always be the same label for the most part.
Yeah.
So even if it's a lie, that food will always tell you the same lie.
Yeah.
So, I think that's the other thing, is that people get really caught up about, like, I had someone recently, he was like, oh, something about hit them exact. And I was like, no, please don't do that. Don't do that to yourself. I was like, actually, I would rather you never hit them exact.
Yeah.
Because you'll probably make yourself kind of crazy doing it.
Oh,
and
yeah.
There's also no such thing as exact macros. Ooh. So please don't do that. I literally was like, don't do that. So, I think it's just, I think that nutrition is a thing that most people don't want to acknowledge or admit, that so much more of it has to do with knowing how to counsel people and having a knowledge of the psychology of motivation and emotion and behaviorism, than it has anything to do with nutritional science. Like, it's my job to understand the nutritional science.
Yeah.
It's not my job to explain that to anyone unless they ask me. They just want to make progress.
I mean, I kind of feel coaching in general is like that too, whether it's coaching for training or nutrition. It's dealing with your clients and getting through them, and being there. And like I said, the whole counseling aspect of it, it's not the program, it's not the diet, it's like how you interact and how you make changes and back and forth.
Right.
So like you said, being a more open listener and working with somebody, because I've had plenty of coaches through my strongman career, and some are, you could tell they're just sending you a program that was already pre-made, and some are like each day checking in, and when you're changing yourself week to week, you're tweaking it. So you can tell a coach that cares to a coach just wants the money. And I think that's a lot of people do. They just want to get the money. So they're just like, here's your program, here's your diet, eat this for 2 weeks, and then we'll check in and see. And you're like, I'm paying for your services. And really, if you're just giving someone macro numbers and they're not like working with you, I mean, there's a limit. Like, I don't want to have 24/7 access to somebody, but you need to have that give and take.
Well, all my clients have access to me during business hours, any day of the week. They'll have my cell phone number. They're allowed to reach out to me whenever they want. So that is something that comes with my coaching. And sometimes I'll just, if I notice someone's struggling, first of all, I never, ever, ever, ever blame the client. The first thing I always say is, what's going on and how can I help you? Mm-hmm. Like what barriers are you having right now and how can I help you fix them? Tell me what your barriers are. Maybe I might have an answer for you that you haven't thought of, right? Yeah, like, it's my job to overcome your help you overcome barriers to success. Like, that's why you hired them.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's not my job to sit here and point my finger at you and just tell you you're doing it wrong. Anybody could tell you that, right? Like, if you don't lose any weight for 2 weeks, you could literally tell any of your friends and they could point their finger at you and go, you're doing it wrong. Right? It's my job. It's my job to say, all right, it seems like you're having some challenges. Why don't we talk about it? And maybe I can help you figure out some ways around them.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's my job as your coach. So yeah, I'm very passionate about that. And I think that coaches that operate differently are really fucking shitty coaches.
Yeah.
And
The bad thing is,
especially in nutrition, for sure. Especially in nutrition. I mean, obviously in training too, for sure.
yeah.
But
Yeah, I would never, like I said, with my clients, I help them and I share from like, especially if I have a client that's a heavier like me and he wants to lose a little bit of weight. Hey, I can help you drop, because I've done it. I've dropped 20, 30, 40 pounds and I can help you there. But I would never take a client like with Alicia that you helped for her last show there at was it Central Missouri show or whatever it was called, Chad Coy show.
yeah, I
Like,
forget what show it was, but
like she had to drop a few pounds and she told me she worked with you. Like if she had come to me and said, hey, I want to drop down to the next weight class, I'd be like, oh, I can't. Like,
oh yeah, she had an easy peasy cut.
Yeah. And it was basically just clean it up a little bit. Like, and it was basically, like you said, it was a weight cut to get down to make weight. It wasn't, hey, I want to compete in the weight class down, but then like you take time, because that's the question I have with one of the biggest things with weight cuts. When is there a difference between like cutting weight or changing weight classes, like whether you're going up or down? Is there like, how do you approach it? If someone comes to you and say they want to drop weight to compete down and they're in the middle of a weight class, say like 30 pounds, I don't know, the women classes are a lot smaller.
Well, I think you have to get away from thinking about it in pounds, and you have to think about it in percentage of body weight, right? So because 30 pounds for a girl who weighs 150 is a massive amount of weight, right? That's 20% of their body weight, or 25% of their body weight, right? But like 20%, yeah. So, but 30 pounds for a guy who weighs 250 pounds or 270 pounds is a much smaller amount of weight.
Yeah.
So we always look at it in percentage of body weight. That's kind of how I always talk to people about it. And my general sort of just easy rules of thumb are that under 5%, anybody can do. Pretty easy. Anyone can do that. If you have at least, 4 weeks in front of you, you can plan to do a 5%, under 5% body weight cut, no problem. The only people that I would say cannot do that are novice athletes, because they have no business cutting weight at all. Yeah. They should be just having fun. And also, you can't cut weight for a novice class, because novice classes don't go anywhere. The only time you do a weight cut is if it's to qualify for something. So you can't cut weight for a class that doesn't qualify you for anything. That's one of my hard rules. You're not allowed to cut weight for a novice class because it doesn't qualify you for anything. Except in USS, but I have opinions about that too.
I do too.
I think everyone has the same opinion about
well,
that.
You know what, but I think I'm an exemption to that rule, because my very first show was a USS show. I competed heavyweight novice. I was 40 when I competed, but it was my first show. I did novice, and I won. And Willie was there because it was a Sean Shoemaker show, and he's like, "Oh, you qualified for nationals?" I'm being like, I just did my first show. When's nationals? He's like, "Oh, it's in like 8 weeks." I'm being like, I'm not going to go. He's like, "You're 40, you qualify, and you can go do masters." So I was like, I don't know what to do. So I went, and then I took 7th. So in my second show I took 7th at nationals out of 25 odd guys. So I think I'm one of the exceptions but it's because I was 40. If I was 39 and I won that show and had to go compete against the open guys, I would have gotten my ass handed to me. But because I was masters, so like there are exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, I don't think novice athletes should be invited to nationals.
Yeah, right. So you can't cut weight if you're a novice. That's my number one rule. Never do a weight cut for someone who's a novice. And if you're not a novice, are you a novice is really the question. It's like maybe you're not competing novice, but are you a novice? Kind of what's your training age? I think if you have a total training age, so maybe you've been doing strongman for only 6 months, but your training age is much longer. That's fine. But I think like if your total training age is under 2 years, you shouldn't be cutting weight ever. Just go have a good time. Just go fucking have fun. Just go out there and have fun.
That's one of the biggest things that I try to get. But like, say you're on like if you look at for men, it's usually like 220. So 220 under and over is lightweight or heavyweight.
I mean, if you're like 222, then obviously go take a poop. Go weigh in.
Yeah.
But that's not a water cut, right? Like that's not even it's nothing. Like
yeah, that's just don't eat dinner the night before, take a good shit in the morning and go weigh in.
yeah, like that's like hardly anything. That's actually such a negligible amount of weight that it could be a normal daily fluctuation, right? So from there, you have a little bit of training age, you're starting to compete, maybe you're like 3% over the class and you want to do a water cut. I'm all for it. Happy to help you. You will probably not have to sweat at all if you're doing sub 5% cut and do your water load correctly. So how I do water loads, it's always correct. If you have a good water load, obviously there are some exceptions to this. Nothing is ever guaranteed. And it's funny, I've probably done 60 to 100 water cuts at this point, and every time without fail I get a little anxious, just because I've never had someone miss weight. I've only had maybe 2 people have a really tough time, but there's always sometimes people's bodies just don't react in the way that you think they will. You never know what's going on. Maybe their stress levels are a little different, just whatever. Sometimes they just don't want to do the thing you want them to do, no matter how much you try to force it. So, but if you have a really good water load and you're sub 3% or sub 5% up to 4%, you're probably not going to have to sweat at all. And that's why I don't mind newer competitors doing something under 4%, under 5%. The reason I don't want new competitors doing something over 5% is because you will probably have to sweat. And the sweating process is really unpleasant. And it is a different kind of stress on your body that is it's just harder, right? It's just harder on your body. It's really not fun. Anyone who's had to sweat weight out is going to tell you it's really not fun. If it's not managed very well, again, obviously anyone who works with me, I'm with them like the entire time. I've stayed up until 2 a.m. before texting someone who's still sweating. Like, so when people are doing a weight cut with me, that's the one time that they have access to me 24 hours a day, anytime. If I'm awake, I'll answer the phone. The only thing I ever tell them is like, if I'm sleeping, then I'm sorry, I'm sleeping.
Yeah.
I will literally turn my do not disturb off that week, and like they can contact me anytime, especially in the last 2 days. So that way, if they're freaking out about anything, they can call me, text me, and they'll get an answer as soon as possible. And the reason I do that is so that they don't have to freak out, right? As someone who's done a lot of really big cuts, the benefit of having someone coach you through it is so that you don't have to think about it. You can just put your trust in someone. You can just turn into a robot, and all you have to do is like operate and execute and do whatever that person tells you. Because it's really easy to get in your head about it. It's really easy to start to freak out. It's really easy to start to worry really quickly. And if you have any additional unnecessary stress, it can certainly affect that water cut. So that's the benefit of having someone just coach you through the whole thing and tell you what to do every step of the way. But I don't like new competitors having to sweat, because it's a different type of stress on your body. I think if you've never done it before and it's not for something big, it's not for something important, then I don't support it. Because the only time I might support it is if a person said, listen, I know that this isn't a big qualifying show or something, but I have these big plans over the next 6, 8, 10 months. And I want to do kind of a practice run. Some people, maybe they've never done a cut like that before, and they're like, I want to just see what it feels like. I might support that if they're starting to kind of get to that level where they're about to maybe get to the point where they'll kind of start to do pretty good at nationals, do pretty good, maybe qualify for OSG, things like that. And they want to do a practice run at a local show. I support that.
See, I think that's one of the biggest things for what people, when they first start out, they kind of look at the weights in the weight classes they're going to do because they gauge their strength. So if they look at the weights for heavyweight as opposed to middleweight, they're like, well, shit, that's too heavy.
Well, they're always like, I should go down because I can do those weights easier.
Yeah, because the weights are lighter, and that's not, it's still strongman and you should push yourself. But like I said, if you're close, then you could try it. And I was even going to bring up too, like you said, the practice cut. And if it's a local show, and hey, I'm going to try to cut. And if you don't make it, just compete at whatever you're in that day. it was a good practice run. Like you said, most
well,
local
if you don't make it, then you just put yourself through a lot of stress, and you probably put yourself at a higher chance of getting injured with the heavier weights, which is, if you don't make it, in my opinion, you're not competing that day.
Well, like at what point, so when you're doing like a weight cut, like when do you know, like say someone's trying to make a 5% weight cut and they're doing like a trial run for a local show just to see if they can get down to that. At what point, like maybe how many days out do you know that like, hey, we're going to abandon it because you're not where you need to be. So why don't we just stop the weight cut after a couple of days or whatever?
Oh, that would never happen, because they would, if they're within 5% a week out, that wouldn't happen.
Okay. Well, even like over 5%, like you said, like work with someone, if they're going, trying to make a pretty decent weight cut and like, at a certain point, like you said, starting 4 weeks out.
If somebody, so let's say, actually I have a really good example. A client of mine, she is a local competitor, and she's competed as a lightweight before. She walks around like typically in the high 150s, low 160s. And in the past, it hasn't been too hard to get her down to like 148. And then it's, not too bad of a cut. I mean, she didn't even have to sweat. She did a water load last time. She made 140 like a breeze. She's been working with me for a long time, and I do her training also. Mm-hmm. So I didn't have a problem doing a water cut for her for that. She's probably one of the few exceptions that I would do a water cut like that, because she is like definitely at a local level. Her name's Jessica. She'll love that I talked about her on this.
Yeah.
And so at the last show that she did, she's not working with me now anymore for programming, but the last show that I programmed her for, I think it was about 8 weeks out, maybe 6 weeks out, 8 weeks out, probably closer to 4 to 6 weeks out. She was still at like 158, and we got on the phone at that point, and her calories had already come down pretty low. And we got on the phone, and I just said, "Is it really worth it?" I was like, "Dude, she's like, I'll do it. I'll bring my food down, whatever we have to do." And I was like, "Jessica, does it really matter that much to you? Like, would you rather just not do this and just go have a good time?" Like, I was like, listen, if it means that much to you, in this case, we can try, mm-hmm. but we might have to pull the plug, and then you might not compete. But in my opinion, I think let's just eat some fucking food and go have a good time. I was like, dude, I think maybe like, I was like, what does it mean to you? I was like, and that's the thing. It's like, what does it mean to you? Like, if you're probably not going to qualify for nationals, or even if you do qualify for nationals, you're going to go to nationals and place 22nd. Like, is that really what you want to kill yourself for that? And then you're going to have to kill yourself again in 4 months so you can go do that, which means you're going to have to diet for the next 4 months. Like, so that for what? For why? Like, you got into this so you could have fun and feel good about yourself, right? So, so we spent a little while on the phone really talking about it, and it was really kind of like, the conversation was less even about my opinions on it, and more about like, listen, let's think about why do you do Strongman? Why did you get into this? Why are you doing it? Why are you still doing it? Why is it important to you? And is all of that really worth like doing all of these things that quite frankly are going to make it very unfun? And I think for the elite competitor, hell yeah, mm-hmm. because their why is to win. CJ Krause, I do all of his weight cuts. His why is so he can fucking win.
What happened at the Arnold?
I didn't do his weight cut at the Arnold.
Oh, well.
That's after that is when the Arnold is when I started doing his weight cuts.
It was funny because I had him on the show just prior to the Arnold. And then he was like, "Oh, I missed my cut." I'm like, he missed his cut by like, he had to compete up like 2 weight classes, and
he missed his cut by a lot.
And that's where he got his nickname now, because now he's the Giant Slayer, because he went with
I was there. Actually, I was there while he was sweating. I was there with him while he was sweating, because I went there to help him. But yeah, so since then I've done all of his cuts. I've handled everything since then.
What he did at Clash was like amazing. See, I don't like the weighing in, because you weigh in like on Thursday, I think, and then he competes on Saturday. He put like 20 some pounds back on. So like, you're really not a true.
Oh, well, he put 20 pounds on the next day though. I mean,
Yeah.
in fairness, he put 20 pounds on Wednesday.
I'm
So
kind
what
of
I will say about CJ is that, and as said, but the difference is that, you know, Jessica competes for fun. She's competing because it's a fun part of her life that she started doing that makes her feel good about herself. Right. So like, why suck the fucking fun out of it? Why are we going to suck all the enjoyment out of the thing you literally started doing so that you could enjoy your life and yourself more? Why are we going to do that? That's dumb. So she went up and she's just competed as a middleweight ever since. And she was like, the weights are heavy, but I don't even care. I'm just going to go lift them and get stronger. And that's exactly the mentality everyone should have. And the other side of it is, like you said, you know, you have these people that are like, well, I can't lift them, so I should diet down. And that, you know, I had a conversation with someone recently. Someone had sent me a message after some of my stories, I think. And I was like, listen, she was like, well, the weights in the next weight class up I can't do. And I said, well, you know, either compete as a novice or realize that at the end of the day, and this might sound a little harsh, and I'm not sorry, but at the end of the day, it's a competitive sport, and there is a barrier for entry. If you are not strong enough yet for the sport, you probably need to just go train and get strong for a while. And I know that's not everyone's favorite answer. It's not the beautiful answer people want to hear, but that's why there are novice classes, so that people who are not strong enough for the sport yet can go have a good time and just compete. And the other side of it is like, yeah, it's a competitive sport. So you have to get strong first.
yeah. I think that's definitely one of the hardest things to get across to people when they first start the sport, because they look at, like I said, they look at the weights and say, well, I can't do this one. I could do this one. But even if you can't do the heavyweights and you go down to the middleweights, really, how good are you going to be? Because you know, by the way, the weights vary a little bit. But if you're telling me you can't hit in a 220 log, but the next one down 200, I can do 200 for one. Well, you're not going to win. You're not being that competitive. So why risk?
And while you diet all that weight down, you're probably not going to get that much stronger either. So
yeah. So for you, is there a difference between, like, say, so let's look at an athlete that's kind of like that. That, hey, I want to get down to the next class. I'm middleweight. I want to get down to lighter. I'm heavyweight, but I want to do it over time. Like I said, not first show in 3 months. Like, I want to compete. Do you, like, you can diet down? You can say, okay, you definitely have weight to lose. We could do like a slow diet.
I mean, the thing is, you can get stronger while in a deficit too. Or like this fallacy that you can't get stronger while you're in a deficit. It's just not true. But but you definitely, I mean, you're probably not going to get stronger if you're in an extreme deficit and you're natural. Like, no, you're going to be tired and beat up all the time, and your recovery is going to be shit. But if you're in a mild deficit over a long period of time, you could absolutely continue to get stronger, build muscle, and lose body fat. 100%. So for someone like in that case, for instance, who's like, you know, let's say I have a guy who wants to beat as a 198, and he's, you know, 230 pounds, 235 pounds. And he has 4 months for sure. I mean, I would absolutely, and he has to be competitive enough and has a good training age and everything. I would say absolutely 100% we could do that. 198s usually I'll start our water cut around 215. So I want you to get to 215, which means we got to lose 25 pounds.
Okay.
20 to 25 pounds. We got 4 months though. That's really not, you know, that's not too bad, right? So we got 16 weeks, 16 to 20 to 18 weeks, which means we need to lose about 1.5 pounds a week. Easy peasy. Yeah, that's easy. That's not a huge deficit. That's something someone can definitely manage. I would for sure want to be, you know, it would have something to do with their training as well, right? You want to make sure their programming is conducive to being able to lose weight. Mm-hmm. Like, you get some guys who are like, well, I train 3 times a week and I just do like 3 lifts each time I go in. And you're like, all right, well.
That's me.
probably gonna add a few things to that. Like, if nothing else, that's great. Cool. I'm glad I saw your program. We're going to prescribe some just general steady state cardio, which means you're going to go for a walk for half an hour, 3 other days a week. You know, we're going to look at your general daily activity, like your total steps, things like that, just because we want to keep their daily activity up. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that would be like not a big deal at all.
So I was even thinking longer term. I was thinking like 6 months or even like saying a year, trying to drop like 30 or 40 pounds for say like a 275 guy that wants to get down to 242s. So okay, like I want to compete.
I mean, a 275 guy who wants to be 242 could just do a water pet almost.
Okay, but then like you said too, like if they're not that level, like I'm saying, like if you're just an average,
if someone's newer, so what I usually tell newer people, because a lot of times newer people who get into strength sports, a lot of the time they're like newer people to fitnessy things, and they found strongman and they think it's fun, but they're trying to lose weight also, right? They have fitness health goals. So for those people, I think like just start losing weight in a healthy way, and wherever I think maybe don't even put a goal, don't put a number on it, don't start looking at weight classes at all. Maybe just like start losing some weight if you want to lose weight, if you want to lose body fat, we'll say specifically, then start losing body fat for sure. Like start doing that if that's your goal, and when you end up where you end up, then you'll see where your weight is, right? Like I don't think that new people should be concerned with where and what the weight classes are at all, ever.
Yeah, I just think the biggest thing they look at when the weight matrix come out, and they look at the weights that they can lift, and like, well,
yeah,
I can't do that class, so I need to be down a class. And like
again, those people should be competing novice, or they shouldn't be competing there.
Yeah, that's opinion. I mean, the novice is funny because we always have the discussion too, like when do you come out of novice? Like how long is novice supposed to be? Podium.
When you come out of novice is when you can lift the weights in the open class.
That's how I feel. You see this stuff all the time on social media. Guys like they've been in novice for a long time. But if they're winning shows in novice, they need to move up. But if they're staying in novice because they're afraid of the weights, then maybe the sport is. Maybe the sport is. Yeah, you don't want to be. I mean, be harsh, but maybe it's
if you're competing in novice and you're like doing 47 reps of the deadlift, like you're competing in novice and it has a max deadlift, and you pull 700 pounds, yeah, I'm gonna fucking laugh at you and tell you to get the hell out of novice.
Yeah.
But like for the most part, yeah, of course, if you cannot lift the weights, that the novice class is there for people who cannot lift the weights in the open classes. I think it goes both ways. You see people who stay in novice way too long, and you see people whose egos way too big to allow them to compete in novice when they should compete in novice. So they do crazy things. Like the girl who's never competed before, trying to lose 25 pounds so she can compete lightweight because those are the only weights she can lift. Which is just it's, to be honest, I think it's really sad because a lot of the time the coach condoning it too.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things is like I know,
which I hate.
When I like with my clients, I try to work. What do you want to do? What are your goals? And I try to be hard on them with the original goals. Like, okay, well, wait, like I think we're reaching too much. Let's just have fun. Let's just stay in novice.
Yeah.
Let's see if you like the sport. And like you said, you keep saying it, is just have fun, because if you start trying to cut out or do this and you don't perform the way you wanted to, or you don't make your cut, or you feel like you suck the fun out of it. And if there's no fun, why even do it then?
And that's not to say that at the elite level we don't have a blast, right? Like if you ask,
you guys have fun.
We have so much fun. But the thing is, dude, the Clash of the 82s, it was such a fucking fun time. It was ridiculous. Like, but that's not to say that like there is a certain amount of seriousness. There's a certain amount of not fun that goes into being at a certain level, right? So like, yeah, you have to start considering things in a different way when you get to a certain level. And so when you're not there, just like, yeah, please go have a good fucking time. If your goal is to be world's strongest woman one day, that is awesome. I fully support that. But have as much fun as you can while you can, because at a certain point, you're going to have to start doing really fucking gnarly weight cuts. If your weight class, I mean, at some point, you're going to have to start doing a lot of fucking training days that feel terrible, that you do not want to do, and your body is going to start to hurt. You're going to go through these phases where like, at a certain point you have to kind of do the elite athlete thing, right? Where it's like some days you have to just be the athlete. And it's like, they say like the thing about motivation where it's like, I'm not always motivated, but I do it anyways. That's what separates like, the elite athletes from the people who aren't like in the 1%. Like, I'm sure there's some fucking Instagram meme about that somewhere.
Yeah.
So with a photo behind it of someone doing bicep curl. I don't know. But that's the thing is like, I was like talking to someone recently and I was like, yeah, you know, sometimes I wish I could just like go back to like, you know, New York Strongest 5, 2017, where I was like in a parking lot, just lifting weights. I didn't care. I was just having a great time. I didn't cut weight to be there. Like, and it didn't matter how I did. Not that I didn't take it seriously because I always wanted to do good. I always wanted to do better than I did before. But that was it. It's like, there was no pressure, right? And at a certain point, when you get to a certain level, it doesn't matter how good you are at focusing on you, there is pressure and you will feel it. And it's like, just have so much fun while you don't have that, right? Like, just have so much fun while the pressure is not there. Because if your goal is to get to the very top, that's awesome. It's so fun and it's so rad. It's so cool. I love every day when I see another strong ass bitch on the internet doing some crazy shit that I never thought I would see in my whole life. But I guarantee you that at some point she feels some pressure.
Yeah.
And it's a little less fun than it probably was at another point. So like, I just think when you're in the beginning, when you're in the first few years, the first 3 or 4 years, all you should be doing is just having so much fun. Just have as much fun as you can. And just make sure that no matter what you do, you're getting better than you were yesterday.
Yeah, I mean that's great advice, and I wish more people would listen to that. But it's I know on my end, because I have mostly male clients that I deal with, and they see people like Evan Singleton, who was at Worlds and is like 3rd or 4th show, or Novikov, who at 24, 25 years, all these guys, they see the quick success they have, and they don't know the background of what they come from.
Well, they don't know the background, right? Like, you know, these guys have been lifting. They didn't just start lifting weights yesterday. Like,
yeah, it might be.
It
might be their 3rd Strongman show, but they've been weight training and bodybuilding or powerlifting, or in Evan's case, you know, wrestling, you know, so they're already elite athletes and they just find a new sport, so they have the quick success. Right. But the average person, it's hard to check that ego, and I don't know if it's more of a guy thing than it is with the girls.
No, like, I think you see it. I mean, I think you see it more. I think the more women are getting into this sport, you definitely see it in the women's as well. You see these, you know, it is tough. Like, I mean, I for sure see it in the women too. Sometimes we see these women that come up and they just, you know, first year or 2 in the sport, they win a lot of things. And then they just kind of like, you know, have this big ego about them. And I don't know. Number one, it can end any day. I just think like if your entire identity is too wrapped up in it, it's really not good, because it can be over any day. It's like, it's this shit is dangerous, by the way. So like, I think never get your identity too wrapped up in it, number one. You know, always be a person first, and then be a strong woman or a strong man or whatever. Be whoever you are first, and then be strong and strong. But also just like, yeah, like just enjoy it while you can, right? Like, I just don't think it's like this like massive ego thing is, for me, it's just weird. Like, it's just a weird thing to me. Like, it just makes it less fun.
Do you see? So the one thing that I've seen in this sport, because it's always about how open this sport is and how welcoming and how fun it is for most people, but there is a dark side to it, and I think it comes from the ego and from the jealousy, and I think that comes at a certain level. Whether the people that get too high too fast, people get jealous of what they have, because there's a lot of like behind the scenes stuff in the sport. I think that the longer I'm into it, the more I'm seeing of it, and I don't know.
Yeah, well.
I mean, it could be that's a whole other podcast if we want to get into some of that shit.
Yeah, that's a whole other podcast. No, I mean, I think with anything, the sport has grown a lot. Like, I got into Strongman 8 years ago, and you know, I know a lot of guys who got into it way longer before that. My friend Kevin Cronin, who's a grumpy old man. Anyone who's been around for a long time probably does know who he is, but no one knows who he is anymore. But he was around, like, you know, like when Johnny Wajcicki started doing Strongman, like a long time ago. And, you know, they always talked about like when they were doing Strongman out of like one person's garage with like a bunch of homemade equipment, like, and anyways, even in the last 8 years, we've just seen this sport grow so much. And I think when you see such massive growth in anything, you are gonna be in a position where, you know, if you put 400 people in a room, they're not all gonna get along. In my opinion, you know, I'm a professional. I also am someone who has had very professional jobs and has managed teams, and I don't think there's anything wrong with being a professional as an athlete too. I think, you know, a lot of people want to cry about like, nobody treats us like a real sport. And I'm like, well, you guys don't act like professionals either. So,
Yeah.
you know, I think that if everyone doesn't get along, we can at least treat each other like professionals, certainly at the higher levels where we all know each other, right? We see each other at everything. We can certainly all shake each other's hands and act like professionals to the camera, and you know, we don't have to like each other, that's fine, but we don't have to fight with each other either, and whatever. A lot of differing personalities, a lot of different people from everywhere, and you know, that's just what happens, right? You get enough people in one area and certain people will connect, certain people won't like each other. You get different personalities. So I don't necessarily think that it's like a dark side. I just think that it's just humans being human.
Yeah, exactly. I
You
think,
know?
like you said, at the elite level, I don't see it so much because, like you said, at that point, you are a professional. You know what it took to get there. You respect everybody for what the hard work. Because when you girls at the under 82 show, yins all deserve to be there, and yins all worked hard, and yins all, you know, there's a mutual respect, and you might not like their personality, but
I mean, I will say in the women's division, in the pro women's division, the majority of us are friends. I mean, I'm friends with most of those women and I adore them, and we all get along really well, and we all go to the bar after the show and drink together. So I will say, like, you know, at least in the women's division, in my experience, most of us are really cool with each other.
See, I think it's the next level down, because the pro men say the same thing. The pro men, it's a brotherhood and they're all there, but I think it's the people,
maybe it's like
the rung down that's trying to get up there, and Anthony always says the crabs in the bucket pulling each other down, and that's where I think that comes into play, because the person that's so close to that pro card at the Arnold, and then they think, okay, next year's my year, and somebody else comes up.
I could see that there might be just like a little bit of like jealousy, or I think it's also, I think because there are so many people at that level, and I think those podiums are constantly changing, there's a little bit less camaraderie too, right? Like, I mean, the entire women's pro division probably has, I don't know, forgive me if I'm wrong, whoever's in charge of this, maybe 150 active women. Like, every single one of us knows who the other one is. Like, none of us, there's no pro woman out there who I would see and not know her name. Like, so I think there's a certain amount of camaraderie. Like, we all know who each other are. We're all familiar with each other, at least to a certain extent, where, you know, I think when we're looking at that level, that kind of high, we'll call them elite amateurs, you're kind of getting this ever-changing group of people, and I think it's a little harder to build any kind of relationships between each other. So maybe they really only ever have the opportunity to have a first glance and a first reaction.
Yeah, that's interesting the way you say that, because I didn't think about that. Because I just, for my own aspect, I know the few years that I did USS, every year, like the people that, you know, in USS used to give pro cards to the top three, the podiumed. So then the next year they would do the Pro Master show. So like every year the podium has changed. Nobody ever comes back. And even looking at this year, like I don't even know any of the guys anymore. Like I looked at the USS Nationals roster and I'm like, I know like three of them now. I haven't done Nationals now since New York in 2018. Yeah. But and with the Masters, it's been because guys are always getting older. So you always have fresh 39-year-olds turning 40 and becoming new to the sport. But you have the same turnover in other classes also, where, like you said, you girls, you've been competing together for a while. You all know each other. You have that friendship, that bond. But a lot of the other classes, new ones coming in, I feel it's just that like you said, that elite, you know, that elite amateur level, trying to get to that pro level, like where you just start to see. Yeah. And I've heard some stuff from OSG last year. We didn't get to go to OSG, but I heard some real negative stuff from weight class to weight class. Which,
yeah, I mean, as I said, I wasn't there, so I have no idea. I didn't really I wasn't there, and I also was like pretty sad about not being there. So I was pretty checked out. I didn't watch it. I didn't.
Yeah.
I only followed up on the few people who were my friends who were competing, and that was it. I'm not sure if I'll go this year, but
It was hard for me to watch last year too, because I did it 3 years prior, and then through injuries and just I messed up. So in 20, I guess was it 2020, it didn't happen. So I didn't do the qualifying videos because I thought Lynn was just going to scrap them. Well, the
see, in
videos.
2020, I did the qualifying videos. I actually ended up ninth in the world pound for pound thing.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome.
And then I think I was third in the lightweight qualifier. I don't want to say the wrong thing because I don't want to piss off anybody.
No, yeah.
Shannon and Ree and Chloe and everyone, forgive me if I'm wrong. I think I was third in the qualifier, but I was ninth in the pound for pound, for sure ninth in the pound for pound in the world. So that was cool. That was like, I was like, oh shit, I'm ninth best in the world at something.
Yeah. See, out
of everyone.
I didn't do him that year because I didn't think Lynn was going to take, because the show got canceled. Well, he still took him. And I'm like, the numbers that got in, he's like, he still took like the top 20.
Yeah.
And I was kicking myself because I'm like, even though I was banged up, I could have easily put those numbers up.
Right.
And then last year I was trying and I was just banged up again and I couldn't get the number. So I think I submitted one video and called it quits. So last year was the first year I watched. It was so hard to watch, knowing I could be there and I could be competing, doing half decent. Like for me, I always feel like maybe on a good day, I can make that third day. Like I'm never going to like podium, but I feel I'm in that like middle pack. And it was so hard for me to watch, thinking like, oh man, I know I could beat that guy, or I know I could have did that, or I would have got so many reps on that. So it was the same thing with the Clash. So I got invited to the Clash of the Masters, and I was an alternate, and then it was like 5 or 6 weeks out, and I'm just not ready for it. So like watching that show, I'm also thinking like, oh man, I could have been there, I could have been doing that, and I would have did okay. I wouldn't have did very well, but it's hard to watch. Like OSG, we're trying to go this year. We wanted to go last year, it was so expensive. So we're going to try to go this year just to watch it. And obviously with Haas, we're, doing the shirts and having the booth, and we're going to like work with them and help them out. So
nice. Awesome. That's cool. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that I have obviously so many friends that compete now that it's awesome if I can go. We'll see when it comes time. It really kind of also depends how it goes with my shoulder, my recovery, and all that sort of stuff right now.
Yeah. So that's about the only thing I have left to talk about that we didn't talk about was your injury. So so your shoulder was kind of strongman related, but it was also wear and tear from your prior job.
Yeah. So I'm having, for people who don't know, I'm having surgery this Thursday, and like probably in less than 48 hours, I'll be in surgery and out of surgery. But I'm having surgery on a bad slap tear in my labrum, which is essentially just a labrum tear, but it's a posterior anterior. So it's directly underneath where your biceps tendon attaches. And I have a torn subscap tendon that looks pretty bad, medium bad in the MRI. I have another rotator cuff tear and another labrum tear that are minor that he said don't look like too bad, like don't need any work done. These two, though, the slap tear is definitely going to get fixed. So he's doing a bicep tenodesis, which is essentially mostly what they do for slap tears now, as far as pain management and ability to get back to sport for athletes. It's essentially instead of trying to fix the labrum, they just take the biceps tendon and they move it and put it onto your humerus so that it's not sitting on the labrum anymore. Most of the pain people get from the slap tear is actually the biceps tendon being really angry because it's sitting right in a torn labrum. So it's sitting on like a really not smooth surface.
Yeah.
So they're going to move my biceps tendon, stick it into my humerus, and then he might fix my subscap tendon. He said it's going to be kind of a game day decision when he gets in there and he sees what it looks like. So the recovery is going to depend on how much surgery he does. If he has to fix the subscap tendon, the recovery is going to be a little bit longer and a little more involved, and I'll be immobilized for longer because that's a rotator cuff muscle. So I won't be able to rotate at all basically for a couple of weeks. If he just does the biceps tendon, I'll have like pretty good movement pretty early on in the shoulder because, if anything, he's actually moving a tendon off my shoulder joint, and then there's really nothing going on in the shoulder joint as far as surgery. So I should have movement a lot sooner, but I will find out when I wake up. But yeah, so it's a lot of wear and tear from Strongman, but Really, it probably was a combination. I used to work in a wind tunnel. I was a wind tunnel instructor, which is essentially, most people know it as indoor skydiving. No one who works in a wind tunnel calls it indoor skydiving. It's wind tunnel flying. But anyways, a lot of people have been to like an iFly, certainly no heavyweight strongman. Sorry, you guys are all way too big. You're over the weight limit.
I can't do nothing no more.
Well, I think the weight limit is 300 pounds.
Yeah, I can't do that.
Yeah, sorry.
I would love to skydive, and I can't. Like I would need the ones that I don't understand, because they drop tanks with parachutes on a tank. So why can't they just hook one of them to me and just drop me on one of those?
Well, skydiving is usually 260, and I believe that has more to do with the tandem harnesses and parachutes than it has to do with anything else. But
yeah.
So in that job, essentially, the majority of the work we do is bringing what we call first timers in. So just people who buy like 2 or 3 minute packages so they can come in and go, staring a camera. And the entire time, basically, our job is that we bring them in. So they're standing up in a doorway. We pull them into the wind and we hold them under our shoulder and our arm like this the entire time, in like 150 degrees, like 140 mile an hour winds. We're just like holding this big fucking human flag down. And most of the time the human flag is not incredibly cooperative. So they're like all over the place. They're being crazy. They're just being idiots. So it's really tough on your shoulder. And it's funny because when I was talking to my surgeon about it, before I even had my MRI, he goes, yeah, that's a really good way to get a slap tear. So it's just really hard on the shoulders. And it's kind of it's a funny, like, it's almost a joke with flight instructors in that company. Like everyone always jokes about how we all have like fucked up shoulders from the job. It is a hard labor job and you do it every day. And, on a weekend, you might take in 100 people in the tunnel like that. You're just doing it all day for 8 hours. And then you're flying too. So when you're flying in the tunnel, your arms are like this, you got all this pressure this way.
Yeah.
So I was doing that while I was competing in strongman. So just a combination of the two. I was already having shoulder pain like back then, but in the last couple of years, it's just gotten really bad. And my last 2 preps for the Arnold and for Clash, I was in so much pain that I was like waking up like in tears, like scream, like I was just, it was so painful. And it's funny because I haven't even really been training for the last few months. I mean, I've been training, but I haven't really, I haven't done any overhead stuff at all for like 3 months. And except like maybe some like little, 20-pound presses. And my MRI from a couple of weeks ago, the doctor called me and he was like, yeah, he's going over all this stuff. And he was like, and the last thing is that every single tendon in your shoulder pretty much has massive tendonitis. And I was like, he's like, and he was like, that's not really a huge deal. It's pretty common with overhead athletes and throwing athletes, like when they're training. And I was like, I haven't been training. I was like, I haven't been training at all. I haven't really trained in 3 months. I haven't really done anything with that arm. And he was like, oh, I was like, you should have seen it 3 months ago when I was training max circus dumbbell every day on it. Yeah, so it's just time. Like, even like, I was in Hawaii last week. I went swimming for like 2 days in the ocean, and I was in so much pain overnight that it woke me up like in my sleep. So I'm just really glad to be getting it fixed and not be in pain anymore. And, the plan after this is to essentially just have one big macro cycle into Worlds next year. And I'm not sure what weight class I'll be in yet because my body weight's been a little weird the last couple of months with some medication that I'm on for these crazy neurological thing.
Yeah.
But we're basically, this is actually a really good example that I'm taking my own advice, is that my coach Taylor Gone and I basically, we were like, listen, we're not going to worry too much about food right now because it'll just be an extra stressor. I'm going to eat what I can, and we'll see what I weigh next year and make a decision when we're like 6 months out on kind of what weight class I want to go to.
Yeah, it's crazy that just the wear and tear on his body. I think we all have nagging issues that could use surgery, but you almost have to, like, you take yourself out of commission for half a year to a year doing it. So like, last year, okay, you went through, you did the Arnold, which was awesome. And you did class, you part of the first, the first class show for the women, which was awesome. So you got two big goals there. And like, now's a good time, like you said, to like, sit back. Okay, let me get my shoulder healthy. Let me get my mind healthy. Let me get everything else healthy, and then make a push for OSG, and then, come out and just crush it at OSG next year.
Yeah, that's the plan. So
It's nice that they added an extra weight class too. So would that affect you with an extra weight class to give you like a little bit more of an option?
So I'm sitting at about 166 right now, 167 most days. The plan was pretty much always to go to the 73 class, the new class. Because I'm really not an 82. Like, I got really heavy for the Arnold, but I was pretty unhappy. I mean, I wasn't unhappy, but I was definitely, it was too heavy for me.
Mhm.
Like we said earlier, just my general health markers, my resting heart rate, my blood pressure is almost always 120/70, and it was actually creeping up, and my resting heart rate was way higher than it ever is. Like, I was getting tired walking up and down the street. I was not having a good time. So I wanted to lose weight anyways, but I wanted to hang out like around 175. And then as I said, I got on this medication and I've lost about 13 pounds in the last 6 weeks. Because I was like almost around 180 and now I'm like 167. And yeah, so the plan was actually always to go to the 73 class, which is 160. And I was going to make a cut from about 172 and just make a water cut. Well, I'm much lighter than that now. So we'll see where I end up. If I end up under 160, I'll go 140 for sure. If I end up at a pound under 160 a few months out, I'll make it to 140, 100%. If I am over 160, then if I'm over 163, 164 still, then I'll probably just really try to consistently eat and get my weight up so that I can be a competitive 73, and I'll do a water cut too. I think that you're doing a disservice to yourself if you're not doing a water cut at a very, very elite level. Because if you can put on a little bit more weight and be a little bit stronger within reason, obviously, like, if you're already at 40% body fat, why would you put on extra weight? That'd be silly.
So that's kind of one more question too before, like, I have cut weight or gain weight. So is there a point like that you would recommend to say they're cutting weight and they're in that weight class, and as they progress in the sport, they're putting on more muscle, they're getting bigger, and those weight cuts are getting harder and harder, but they want to stay as a lightweight or a middleweight? Like, is there a certain point where you was like, as the nutrition coach, I'm telling them like, look, it's time to move up because it's just too hard of a cut? And I know you work off percentages, because you look at a lot of athletes, because Tyler Young has competed 80, 90, and 105. Well, he's gotten so big now, like he couldn't go back and compete in the smaller classes. Like, I think, just if you're lean, you're gaining weight, you're putting on muscle, you're putting on size. So you hit a certain point where, and with the women, the weight classes are kind of close. So like, if you get too heavy because you're too muscular, is it worth it to still kind of cut, or do you just say fuck it and go up a weight class?
Well, I think part of it is a personal decision, and part of it is definitely a health decision. I mean, some people at some point are just going to say, you know what, I'm done making this cut. Like, I know Chloe Brennan just decided to be a 73 from now on. They made that class. It was a good class for her. She doesn't want to make the cut anymore. She wasn't making as big of cuts as I was, but it was unpleasant for her and she didn't like to do it, and she wants to be bigger and stronger. Fuck yeah, I fully support that. Hell yeah, do that. So I think that part of it is just your own kind of personal decision. And I think the other part of it, there's definitely a safety aspect, right? I think that you don't really often see people who get too big for their class that are natural too often.
Yeah.
And I talk pretty openly about this, right? Like, I'm not a natural athlete, although I'm very natty right now. I have been natty for almost 6 months. Yeah, but I think when we're looking at especially small athletes and drugs, I think that there have to be a lot of conversations around their expectations around weight classes. And that was something that was a big factor for me. I knew that once I took certain drugs, I was probably going to gain weight, and that was probably going to edge me out of the lightweight class.
Yeah.
So I was really careful about my drugs for a lot of years because I didn't want to put on too much weight because I do not have a tiny frame. Like I am much taller than Daphne Zhang, for instance. So I think there's just some considerations like that. But I think ultimately, I decided to finally move up weight classes when I was 162 pounds and I had abs.
Yeah.
Because it was like, obviously, if you're already getting pretty lean and, if you're like into the teens of body fat and you're above the next weight class, yeah, we probably need to have a conversation about making the cut.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, with what Anthony's doing with the class, and even with the new class at OSG, I think the fact that there's more opportunities now for weight class athletes, that maybe it's not putting so much stress on them to take so much gear where they got to get bigger, because obviously to go up to class, they got to get stronger, they got to get bigger. So maybe it'll help maybe with the health of the athletes, knowing that you can stay in the class that you're in and don't have to kill yourself to get upper class, and then still have the same opportunities that only with it, years ago, only the high level athletes were getting. Now we're seeing across the board with more stuff open up for the lighter people.
Yeah, I think and I think also in the past, a lot of lighter people have felt like they had to move up classes to have more opportunities, right?
Yeah.
Now, yeah, like what you're saying, for sure. So I think CJ is actually also a good example, where CJ is someone who is definitely getting kind of big for his class. I mean, he's normally walking around sometimes he gets as big as like 205, 210.
Yeah.
And he's still quite lean nowadays at that weight. So I think for him, in the next year or so, there will be certainly more thoughts about, is it time for me to move up? Right. My weight is above the next weight class and I'm very lean. So I think that's a good indicator, right? I think a good indicator is to say, I'm currently walking around above the next weight class and I'm lean. So I think that's probably a good indicator. I think gauging it based on the last cut you did and how low you can diet. As said, I think with elite athletes, you can push harder and you can push into slightly sketchier territory. So the conversations are much different than they are with anyone else.
Yeah.
It's a lot more based on like, hey, what are you comfortable with? And you have to tell me when you need to pull the plug. Because where I'll pull the plug on anyone else, for someone who's trying to go for a world record or a world title, I'm going to let them pull the plug and I'm going to trust that they know where their absolute limit is. And I'm going to also trust that they know that they can push themselves really far.
Yeah.
And that's a very real thing. And I think it's something you can only leave in the hands of people who are at the very top. But yeah, so as far as like lower people, the question of switching weight classes doesn't really, it's not like ever really such a big deal, I think, for people who are maybe more local athletes or more amateur athletes. Like usually it's like something like my conversation with Jessica, right? Where it was kind of, hey, what does this mean to you? Do you really want to do this? Do you really want to do this thing that's like gonna kind of make it less fun for you because you're doing it for fun? With elite athletes, well, they're not doing it for fun, they're doing it to win.
Yeah.
So
but like you said, and also to point to, like, and Steve is a great example. At some point, he's going to continually get stronger and bigger, and that weight cut is getting further and further. And something like this with the show he has coming up at the Arnold, he missed his cut and just competed up. But if he misses his cut coming up here at this U80 show, you don't compete. So
he won't miss his cut. He won't miss his cut at the 80 show first.
I have faith in you. You'll definitely make sure he makes his cut. But just, it's one of the things where it's something you got to weigh out. Like I said, that's a perfect example. The way you said that he's actually in two weight classes, walks around two weight classes above, and it cuts through a whole weight class down to the next class. So that's pretty crazy.
Well, the thing is that most of the elite 80 kilo guys walk around at 200 pounds. It's not unheard of. Most of them will walk around on 205 and then they'll diet down to 195 and they'll do a water cut. Yeah. But I know because I work with a lot of them. But I think it's kind of when you get to people who are at that level, you kind of leave it to their own discretion. And that's how it was for me also. As said, if you look at an athlete like Chloe Brennan and me, that's a very good example of like two people who exist in the same world, compete at the same level. We made the exact same decision, but we made it at very different places and for kind of very different reasons. I think also, like, like this is a person who's not, she was still having to diet a lot. She was frequently on a diet, and it was affecting the quality of her life. And I think that's kind of how I felt too. I think maybe for me in some ways it was a little more extreme because I was making much bigger cuts. I was having much bigger water cuts for sure than she was. I think she was definitely dieting as often, but maybe not having to diet quite as hard. But even so, that kind of like the constant, even if it's like a constant gentle dieting, it really, like, over time, it really just kind of affects your life. Like,
yeah.
And as said, even we just want to have fun, sometimes. So, it's a good example of like, at this level, you kind of leave it up to the athlete's discretion sometimes, and how they feel and what limits, where they draw the line. Right.
Yeah.
So she drew her line there. I don't remember where she said she was cutting from. I think she said she was cutting from like 66 kilo or 67 kilo normally. Whereas I was cutting from like 72 kilo sometimes.
Yeah.
My water cuts were from a lot lower than that, but I was dieting down from 70. So, but it's the same thing. It's kind of like, that was her decision at that place, and it was my decision at the place I was to move up. So, and I think, CJ at some point in the next year or two will make the decision probably also. I think, you see those athletes that are kind of on that ledge, that are having a diet really frequently. They're at a certain point, you start to like think about how you're eating and how you're training, and you're kind of like, am I meeting my potential here anymore? Or do I actually have more potential in the next weight class? Like, you start to wonder about that as an athlete. And I think when you kind of figure out where you stand on that question is when you make the decision.
Yes, especially, and you've been saying this whole podcast, the difference between an elite athlete and then just your regular athlete. So I think for most people, they realize it, and most people I think know where they are. If you're not getting invited to class, or you're not being competitive the third day at OSG, then you're not that elite athlete. So then, like I said, just compete, have fun. If it's within the 5% and you need to cut to make a weight class, cool, do it. But don't suffer your whole life, your whole year to walk around and wait and plan, because like I said, it's going to suck the fun out of life, going on vacation, eating what you want. There's too much to enjoy out here. So
yeah, I mean, I think that like, and I think the thing is, a lot of people who are in what you'd consider like the amateur level, when you talk about the difference between like elite and amateur, they almost like feel like you're putting them down or insulting them, and that's definitely not the case.
No, some people that
I think that people do get a little in their head about it, like, oh well, she's saying I can't be elite, and it's like, no, I'm not saying that. I'm just asking you. I'm just saying, let's be realistic about where you are right now, and operate based on that, right? Like,
and that's one of the, and that's what makes you such a great coach, though, because that kind of relationship you have, and that honesty, and that's something I try to do. Like, be honest, be realistic where you're at. Know what your goals are, know what your expectations are. It's great to have them end goals, to say that you want to get your pro card and you want to go to OSG, or you be a class athlete, and that's great to have those goals. And by all means, we'll totally encourage them. But then you have to sometimes look back too and say, okay, well, what's it going to take to get there? Where are you at now? And let's just have fun getting through the process instead of beating ourselves up over it.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
So I think that's all I really have for you. We definitely went longer than the hour that I was trying to do.
Talked for a very long time.
Yeah, it's awesome. Like, there's so much information that you give out. I hope people listen to this and listen to it 2 or 3 times and take away a lot of the stuff, because there's so much good stuff, and a lot of it's just almost like basic, just basic nutrition, basic coaching, that people look past all of that so much. Like you talked a lot earlier about like being too precise and too intricate on stuff when it's not that hard.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I usually tell most people when they start working with me is that I like to keep it as simple as possible for as long as possible. That's my motto.
Yeah. That's
So,
easy. I mean, and it's the easiest thing to follow. And then as you start seeing the results, and obviously if you're getting close to that weight cut, then we need to hit our markers going in. But the initial, we can all clean our diet up and adjust our stuff and drop some added weight and be more healthier. And then just like let the chips fall where they may.
yeah, absolutely.
So I really want to thank you for coming on, taking the time to do this. It was an excellent talk. It's the first time me and you really talked. We talked a little bit, I think, at Clash. But like I said, this was awesome. I'm glad you did it. It's one of my favorite ones so far because I learned so much from talking to you that I'll probably be picking your brain for a long time over stuff.
Oh yeah, go for it. Drop in the DMs whenever you like. And thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's funny. It's been a while since I did a podcast, so I was like, oh, I hope I'm ready for this.
No, you did. You did great. I can tell you've done it before, and you're a talker, and everything was excellent. I want to wish you good luck in your surgery coming up here in a couple of days. Hopefully everything goes good and you get all fixed up, and then we can get you back competing again.
Yeah, hopefully. And I'm sure I'll see you around, and thanks for having me on, and have a good night. Yeah.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Rebecca.
Bye.
Bye.